Have the markets and broader society reacted to this news?
There's been no reaction to this news per se. I think the market actually closed more or less on higher volumes from yesterday, and the key driver was the KPLC rights our closing trading today. The stock exchange NSE 20 closed down about 10 points lower than it closed yesterday, meaning that from the list that was actually released by Ocampo earlier, there was no immediate reaction on the stock exchange.
You know, there were concerns that the markets were a bit jittery about political risk elements that might seep through on the release of this report. Is political risk still a big worry for those wanting to invest in Kenya?
I don't think political risk is a big worry, because I think, as you've seen from the list that has been announced, the only risk that would see to this list is the position of the Deputy Prime Minister, who's also the Minister of Finance. Should he be pushed to resign, then that would be a risk factor for anyone who's looking to invest in Kenya. But then what we are saying is the fiscal year for the Kenyan government is already halfway through. Monetary policy, fiscal policy has already been implemented, and we expect this to remain as is. And more or less, we are confident in the team that's actually in the Ministry of Finance to continue with the development projects, with the infrastructure projects that are already ongoing.
Let's talk about the case that the ICC has presented to Kenyan authorities and what Luis Moreno Ocampo has built this list on, this possible indictment. What is it based on?
I think his taking the six to The Hague is more a factor of their lacking a judicial mechanism to address the perpetrators of the post-election violence. And his reasoning is he's taken the six to The Hague to be prosecuted by the judges at the ICC. Because there's no judicial mechanism that's currently in place to address such issues. And secondly, there's been about 2 to 3 trials in terms of setting up tribunals, in terms of setting up special courts to address these issues, and this has not been the case. But I think going forward, the cabinet is definitely going to try and push this through Parliament to come up with a judicial mechanism to address this. And any people who come up on that list going forward should automatically be prosecuted within the Kenyan judicial system.
Now, Mbithe, in the absence of no formal national judicial mechanisms that are available, the ICC is hoping that the suspects will present themselves voluntarily to The Hague. Are we likely to see this cooperation? Is there any indication already from authorities that they will work hand in hand with the ICC?
I think you can look at that two ways. Mr. Ocampo actually presented he filed his cases earlier today, and the judges at the ICC have 3 options. They can either accept the case, then issue warrants of arrest for the perpetrators, or reject the case. Should they accept the case and I think issue warrants of arrest, we've already had statements coming in from Uhuru Kenyatta and Francis Mudhaura saying that they'll cooperate with the process, and they're also urging the electorate to remain calm at this point and not to engage in any malicious talk or malicious activity.
Let's talk about Uhuru Kenyatta, as you said, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and 5 others. Now, this comes at a time when the Kenyans have just about managed to get the Grand Coalition working well, especially after the promulgation of the Constitution in August. There is a fear that this could lead to a very serious political fallout. Your views?
I don't think it's going to lead to a political fallout. I think what will happen is the heavyweights, some of the individuals in the political sphere in Kenya who've actually been eyeing the top seat now will realign themselves and try to garner the votes that would have been attributable to Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta if you actually get to the point where he actually decides to get out of the race, because he had actually been touted by some of the local politicians as a would-be candidate for the presidential election. I don't think there'll be any political instability on the back of this. I think Kenya is reeling from a point of ethnic clashes back in 2007, 2008, and we're getting to a point where we want to end impunity and we want to embrace the rule of law and just hold it together and develop our country going forward. So I don't think this will have any impact in terms of social, economic or political instability.
Right. You talk about this having a positive effect in terms of ending what is perceived to be an era of impunity, and for many investors investors. That's very, very important, that Kenya is seen to embrace democracy, constitutionality, the rule of law, and to end this culture of impunity. Why is that important? Historically speaking, why is there a sense that people get away with things in Kenya?
I don't think getting away with things only happens in Kenya. I think it's been the trend, at least in most African countries. But I think we've gotten to a point where over the last 10 years we've elected a new president. Over the last year we voted for a new constitution, and this new constitution sets out specific guidelines towards leadership and integrity, which we think is very important, because you don't want to be in a position where you have leaders in public office who are misusing public funds, yet on the other end your local taxpayer is paying his taxes and trying to engage in fruitful economic activity towards the achievement of the Vision 2030. So I think it's a matter of, we have embraced the new constitution, we have voted in its favor. We want people who are of high integrity standards, high integrity levels, sitting in public office and doing what they're supposed to do, as opposed to acting in a way that makes it look like we owe them a favor for being in that office.
Let's talk about Kenya going forward. I mean, very positive sentiments and forecasts for growth, somewhere in the region of 5 to 6%. We know the NSE has been probably the best performing stock exchange in Africa, with returns of about 33%. We've seen a general and steady recovery in all sectors. For investors still looking into the economy, this issue is going to have some bearing. Do you think it's going to have a very heavy bearing in terms of how Kenya is perceived?
I don't think it's going to have a heavy bearing, and maybe what I can do is just pull out the card where Amos Kimunya was also the Minister of Finance in 2006 and 2008, and he had to resign from his position, and there was a bit of a scare with the international community as to what would happen to the country. But he stepped down, and everything continued on as is basis. I think it's important to also remember that following the post-election violence, the business community has sort of begun to separate itself from the political affairs. And everybody's just trying to put bread on their table, just trying to move forward and trying to do what's best for their people and for their society. I don't think the people who've actually been listed on Ocampo's list, should they resign, if they'd have a significant impact on the economy, I don't think so. I think things would just continue, and probably new people would actually be brought to actually replace them and continue with the work that the ministries are currently doing.